Hey folks, welcome to a podcast about Catholic things. This is Eric, the ambassador of common sense, and I'm here with
Dan, your ambassador of nonsense. Welcome, everyone.
I trust we're both drinking from our Mount Rushmore coffee mugs. I have to
That's right.
Put a picture of those, because Dan went to Mount Rushmore and he bought me a coffee mug, and he's got almost the same one. I got a blue one, he's got a black one.
Right. And the thing about the thing that made me buy these for us was that I got real excited when I saw the shape, because we've talked before. I think we've even talked about it on this podcast, how those mugs that Precision Roller sent us are like exactly perfect in every way. The perfect amount of coffee in a cup, the right shape, the right size and shape of the handle. Everything's just right. And I saw these on the shelf at Mount Rushmore. I thought, wait a minute, I've seen that mug before.
And they're pretty strong. Anyway. I that's a big deal when you're going through coffee mugs, like how easily they break. These will break eventually, because one of my kids broke my other mug. But
oh, did he? Yeah. Well, you know
broke
what?
The handle off of one of them.
That's when I have to say, well, I gotta run out to Mount Rushmore and
go get
another
couple more
mug for our podcast.
Okay. Well, anyway, our topic this week, over the past week or two, I've actually seen a couple different podcasters take on the question of what's next for people like us. And I think they were primarily talking about like Catholic insiders who I guess you might call us insiders. We're really not, but we know a lot of the insider information. But for the average Joe, I think what's been said up till now has been kind of useless and pointless. I mean, they want to put some kind of definition on what kind of ism we ought to be backing or believing in, and it's like, that doesn't help us much.
No.
We're stepping into an unprecedented time right now. But I think we could still look to the past to find out, maybe get a kind of a window at what's coming, and maybe even know a little bit about what to do about it. But I guess the topic is, what do we do? And I'm not talking about people like us who have podcasts. I'm talking about people like us who work throughout the week and then go to church on Sundays and try whenever we can to spread the faith however we can. But really, that's not our job to spread the faith. Certainly not our job to say Mass. But I mean, this was all kind of... What set me off on this was the fact that Father James Altman was it his faculties were suspended?
Right. Yeah, the Pope, or his bishop rather, sent him a letter, and I've heard the letter read on a particular podcast with all the different points that it means, and things like, he can't say even private masses except only in the presence of his parents and stuff like that.
It's sad and it's tragic, and I'm not I'm nowhere near a lawyer. I don't know anything about canon law, and I still question, can the bishop do this? And it's my understanding that the bishop has absolute power here, unless, if he's not, as long as he's not commanding him to do something wrong. But
right.
And then of course he can appeal to a higher office. But as far as what the bishop did have the authority to do this, it's my understanding anyway.
His power within his diocese is pretty absolute. In fact, in Father Altman's, in a general sense, his case isn't unprecedented or new. We have other past cases of people being excommunicated for bad reasons by ill-intentioned bishops or popes.
Yeah.
And the sad part of it is they have to obey, for example, in their cases, the excommunication, which means they can't get to the sacraments, even though in every moral sense they should be able to receive the sacraments, but they've been excommunicated. Well, okay, so we have, in this case, a priest who is having his faculty suspended by his bishop, basically for telling it like it is. I don't know the whole story in terms, and maybe you have read a little bit more about this in terms of, I mean, I know basically why he was suspended, but was there back and forth? Was there give and take? Was there, hey, you're going to be suspended if you don't take these steps? And he said, well, no, I'm sorry, I can't take those. I mean, well, do you know anything more about the sort of details of the story?
I don't think there was a whole lot of back and forth. He had been warned at one point, and he had a discussion with Bishop, I want to say Casey. What was that
his
bishop's name?
You're talking about his bishop or someone else?
Yeah,
his bishop is Bishop Callahan.
Callahan. I knew it began with
this is
a C.
LaCrosse, Wisconsin, by the way, everybody.
I know a Casey Callahan. That's why I got confused.
Yeah, stuck. I know, that's...
Okay, so Bishop Callahan had warned him at one time, and he had a discussion with him, and he thought the discussion went well, and he thought he was okay to do what he was doing. Now,
that tells you what kind of bishop he has.
There were other, as far as what got him into the hot water, there's all kinds of stories. It depends on who you talk to. I don't know what the bishop himself would say, but I know, some people are saying it's because of spreading misinformation about the COVID vaccine, as if the Catholic Church hasn't been doing that for a while now.
Yeah, was he spreading any information about it?
He's against it, and he's warning people not to take it.
Okay,
there's the fact that he's not forcing people to wear masks at church. Speaking of which, his masses are very, very crowded. Mm-hmm. Which can't really be said for a whole lot of pastors out there right now.
Yeah, that might be have more to do with his suspension than anything else. He is generally conservative in both a Catholic and apparently political sense, and very popular. And that's the poison combination.
Yeah, what made him really popular was the fact that he out and out said you cannot be a Catholic and vote for these Democrats. It is a sin to vote for these Democrat politicians. One that might even cause you to go to hell.
Every bishop should be telling their flocks that they cannot vote for Democrats, period. Thing is, take the whole moral theology aspect of that aside, and let's just take a sidebar on this whole Democrat thing. When you have an entire political party, an entire group of people who have decided that it's one of their specific political goals, their specific beliefs, their specific truths that they uphold, that not really a truth, but their assertions about society, is that mothers ought to be able to have their babies killed. Those people, there's something foundationally wrong with their whole view of humanity and society.
Yeah. You can't be wrong about just that and not be wrong about
everything else. I mean, everybody with any sense would look at that, and they would do well to, at best, treat everything else that group of people concludes, believes, promotes with an extreme skepticism.
Yeah.
And more probably the best thing to do is just to ignore everything else that they promote and say, nope, we're not even going to use you for a point of reference. That's the right Catholic approach to Democrats in America today.
Which is how
and it's the
Father
right human approach
Altman,
to Democrats in America today.
Handled most things. So
yeah.
That's probably, in the end, I think we're
That's
all
what got him in trouble.
in agreement. That's what got him in trouble. You know,
yeah, it's the thing about the Democrat. That's the one thing the bishops cannot stand is this resistance to Democrats.
Right. So, you know, it kind of, as I'm watching this happen, and let's face it, as the laity, okay, the priests who are in this kind of situation, there's really nothing they can do about it. And as the laity, there's certainly nothing we can do about it other than not give these people money.
Take your checks elsewhere. Contribute either to a solid conservative seminary formation school. Contribute to the priestly retirement fund. Whatever. Just don't give it to the diocese of bishops who act like this.
Well, you know, the problem is that more and more, the bishops who are in power right now really don't care. They're closing parishes left and right and selling off the assets. And, you know, I heard from...
but they're consolidating.
Who's the guy at the Remnant? Morris. Something Morris, I think.
I don't know who the...
Hold on, I'm going to look him up real quick, because I want to give credit.
Get the name right?
Yeah. Michael Voris.
Oh, you're not thinking of the Remnant. You're thinking of Church Militant.
Church Militant. That's what I'm thinking of. Anyway, he was mentioning how some of these... one of the bishops in particular was selling off properties that had endowments attached to them. So as soon as he closes it, all the money that was going to that parish immediately goes to him, or at least is controlled by him. And these bishops they're not really interested in maintaining a rich diocese. They're interested in maintaining their own comfort.
So you're thinking that some of these bishops have run the calculations and said, hey, I can maintain my lifestyle
right
long enough by doing this, and the poor bishop that comes after me, he'll have to do his own fundraising.
Yeah.
Even if I help everybody else and nobody's bothering to contribute to the... You know, that could be. I mean, I don't doubt that there are some bishops that are in that place. Who knows? Maybe most of them. I don't know.
That seems like that's...
It used to be they cared about the money from the parishes.
Yeah. But that's when they were younger. A lot of these guys are old.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. I mean, if they're only looking at, 20 more years likely of having, being allowed or being able to be a bishop anyway, and then at some age they have to retire. And at that point, they'll no longer control the diocese. The money.
They're getting a lot of their money from the U.S. government and from other governments.
Yeah, that's the thing. They get a lot of money by having Democrats
worldwide.
In charge.
So taking your money away doesn't do a whole lot. You should still do it. You definitely shouldn't be giving money to these kinds of bishops. They shouldn't get one penny of your money. But it doesn't necessarily mean a whole lot. And so you're still kind of left with, well, what can I do about this? And really the answer is nothing. But you
can pray.
I wanted to point out a couple things about history, and I guess to get a better perspective on what's going on right now, just go back to American history in the past 50, 60 years. Because I would point to the 60s when most people would admit it was a different country. The Catholic Church was strong, and it wasn't powerful, but it was strong because there were a lot of conservative Catholics. And, I just watched a Barney Miller, and this was made in the early 70s and maybe even late 70s. They arrested this guy who was he had been a criminal during the 60s, as far like a protester, blowing up buildings, things like that. And he was disappointed that the FBI, even though he was wanted by the FBI really wasn't looking for him and had kind of, they weren't rejoicing in the fact that they had caught him. It was kind of like, oh, well, this is an old thing that we don't care about anymore. And he was disappointed in this. And the other characters were saying, look, 60s were a bad time. And it's a time most of us just want to forget. And I think they're right about that. That's at the end of the 60s.
Are there.
I didn't live in the 60s, but I see the films about it. There was a lot of anger and hatred. And it was mostly aimed at changing what Americans had already come to agree was a good way of doing things. It was aimed at changing morality, changing sexuality, things like that.
Yeah, especially.
That's where most of the turmoil was. This was a sexual revolution. They had drugs. They were trying to normalize all this bad behavior. And I think we could say they won in a way.
In a sense that they succeeded. I mean, you look at, the even those who call themselves conservatives, I mean, conservative Catholics, okay, set them aside. Political conservatives, non-Catholics, people who aren't specifically Catholic. The fact that it's almost like overnight, the discussion about marriage went away. There's nobody, no political conservative commenter, politician, etc., or very rare and few and far between, who are willing to say, wow, that Supreme Court decision was wrong. We need to roll it back. We need to restore marriage.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, in the 70s, I would say most, I don't think these, I don't know what you would call them, these demonic warriors, I don't think they changed the hearts and minds of America. But because there was a huge fight, and the fight seemed to be over, as in they were no longer fighting people, people wanted to forget about the fight. I think traditionalists and conservatives were less likely to fight back in the schools and in media when the media and the schools insisted on normalizing deviant behavior because of all the fighting that happened in the 60s.
Oh, you're kind of tired of that fight.
I'm kind of I'm theorizing here because, again, I wasn't alive at the time, but
picking up the fight now for a lot of people who are older than we are would be like reliving the 60s.
Yeah, and it's like what happened was, okay, in the 60s there was all this turmoil, and then it went away for a time. But the problem is that it went away because good people were tired of fighting, and so I think good people thought we can just continue being good and ignore all this stuff because it's such a small percentage of people. There's not that many gays out there. We don't have to fight homosexuality. They didn't realize it had crept into the seminaries and into the priesthood, and they didn't realize it had been taken over. Hollywood had been taken over by it. And here we are without even talking about it for 50 years. And all of a sudden it's being crammed down our throats.
Yeah.
Well, what did they expect to happen? When we didn't fight it, this is what happened. Now we're living that out. I'm just pointing that out because it happened in the Catholic Church.
Right. This is that same process which happened in broader society. That is what happened in the Catholic Church, and that is I mean, you think about it. I mean, I'm 50 something, and I came into being at the tail end of the 60s, literally December 1969.
Yeah.
So anybody who would have had a real, let's say, anybody alive today who had really gone through the 60s, and when I mean gone through, not viewed it from kids' eyes, but as somebody who would have been caring and engaging and possibly part of that fight. I mean, they had to be, at least, 15 to 17 by the time the 60s started.
Right.
So they're going to be almost 25, 30 years older than I am. Those are the people who gave up the fight. Giving up the fight allowed the seminaries to be flooded and, with the gays and so on and so forth. And so now the product of that process are the bishops who are making these decisions today.
Yeah. And let's face it, 2020 was a rough year, because it was rough because finally conservatives, traditionalists, and just Christians were standing up and trying to take the country back.
Yeah, they woke up.
As we know, so far, it failed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not over yet, but how many people out there would like to just forget 2020 even happened?
And just go back to living the quiet lives where, the culture continues to slowly roll forward like a great big, just steamroller.
Yeah, and on the inside, it's rotting.
Yeah.
And so just... if you're one of those people, consider 50 years from now how bad it's going to be if we don't keep fighting.
That's true. I think a lot of people have, a lot of people who kind of woke up in 2020. Now, there's a lot of people who are still like, it's kind of like 2020 was a wake-up call. It's like woke up, looked around them and said, holy cow, how did we get here? How did this get so bad? Parents are starting to see what kids are learning at school and other things like that. So those are great things. And a lot of them have taken up and they're going to keep on. So that's great. But I think you're right. I think a lot of people have grown tired of the fight in one short year. What does that say about how the character of people have changed? It took a decade to tire of the fight, 50 years ago.
In the 60s, yeah. Now, it was a long, drawn-out fight. This
now
time
it takes
it was
a year
to
tire of the fight.
So, and we are at a point where it's kind of... I don't know if there's any precedent for it because, the way I put it in when we were texting about it is, we've seen throughout history people leaving the church, and throughout history, a lot of these people have said, I didn't leave the church left me. But, this time, that's really happening.
It's kind of almost happened, but, the thing is, this is where I keep getting back to, I know that we've talked kind of about comparing what may be coming. We're not there yet, but what may be coming to like the martyrs, the Catholic martyrs during the English Protestant revolt and stuff like that. But I almost wonder if in some ways, at least right now so far, it's a little bit more like the widespread Arian heresy because the bishops themselves, so many of the bishops were Arians. And yet they were the bishops. Even though they were formal heretics, juridically they were still the bishops. They still conferred holy orders. The priests received holy orders from them and gave the people communion and heard confessions and so on and so forth.
But that's
still our way to do that. We still have to get that from our bishops.
But the Pope was never Arian, as far as I know.
Well, there have been, like, you've got the case of, like, who is it? The Pope Honorius and other things like that, where there's, like, some cases where popes have gone pretty far astray. And you've got cases where popes were certainly bad behaviors. I'm not quite sure that this pope's, that you look at this pope is, it's weird because he's so obviously wrong. It's like, you can't be a thinking, well-educated Catholic and believe that some of these things that this pope says and signs on to are valid Catholic faith.
Yeah, there's no set of theological argument that could be misunderstood here. You can't look at it and say, well, okay, he's disagreeing on this hinging theological notion, and
It's not like John the 22nd.
Like
I think was it John the 22nd who thought that the deceased faithful do not enjoy their reward until the end of time. And theologians got together and pointed out and said, well, no. As Catholics, we believe this. And they pointed out that this is what people have believed for a long time and gave theological reasons. And he recanted. He said, oh, okay, I guess I was wrong about that. But this Pope isn't even like that. It's like he comes out and says these things that are obviously wrong, that no, like I said, thinking educated Catholic can take in a light that it's not wrong. And when people point it out or even just attempt to ask questions about it, can you clarify this, Holy Father? He ignores them.
Yeah.
Which, to me, that's kind of like the indication that, well, yeah, he knows it's wrong and it was wrong intentionally. So I got to admit, I'm kind of befuddled as to how to categorize that within church history. I think that aspect of it for us is maybe a little bit unprecedented.
It is very unprecedented. And I do point to the Church of England not to say, look, they kind of went through something like the same thing, but I do point to it to illustrate that not the church on the whole, but the faithful living on the ground, just trying to get through their days, have gone through much worse.
Oh yeah, right.
The church on a whole. I mean, the bishops can argue all they want, and again, we've got podcasters pointing out this ism and that ism and all the different isms that we ought to be backing. But when it comes to me getting my kids to church on Sunday, it's getting harder because I have to go further to avoid the Novus Ordo. And now it looks like maybe they're going to take the Latin Mass away from us altogether, which means we have to go to the Novus Ordo. And because they have the authority to do this, then that's what we'll have to do. But what if they take the Novus Ordo away? Well, they did.
Well,
during COVID.
Yeah, they took it away. I mean, we went for an entire Lent and Easter.
Yeah, Easter. No
without
Mass.
Being able to go to Mass. We didn't get to go to Mass at Easter.
That's insane.
That's nuts. That's unprecedented. Not because it was dangerous and there were bandits on the roads and nobody could make the trip to the cathedral. Not because there was a war going on and there were bombs dropping all the time and you dare not spend time in the city. Because the bishops closed the churches down and ordered the priests not to say Mass at which people could attend.
And not even because they were under pressure to do
the Mass. Right. The bishops led the charge. The bishops were doing it before the governors were asking them to.
Yeah, and now a lot of them are kind of slow to open back up. And it's...
Yeah.
Another part of this is that, and we talked about this a couple weeks ago, in England, looking back on what happened with the Church of England and the persecution of Catholics, especially priests and people who helped priests, we could say, well, these people were persecuted and a lot of them were martyred. They died for the faith. At the time, it wasn't quite so clear-cut, and it wasn't always seen that way.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of them thought they were dying because they were traitors to the crown.
To the crown, exactly. Yeah, I think that's one of the things that within a time of turmoil like this, like the Protestant Revolt, there are competing, let's say, drives. Mm-hmm. All of them noble in and of themselves that may tug a person's mind one way or another about something.
Yeah. Well, Father Altman.
But
why is he being persecuted? let's say that he could be imprisoned. Would this be persecution? Religious persecution? I don't know. You could say, because the people putting him in prison, well, the bishop who suspended him is saying it's because of misinformation. But really, we know that it's because of politics.
It's because he is calling out Catholics who want to support Democrats.
What we really know, what it really boils down to is, and what a lot of people would point out, is that it's because he is promoting virtue.
Yeah.
That's really the problem. That's why he's being persecuted right now. And he's criticizing people who don't fight for virtue. Mm-hmm. So I guess what I'd point out here is that things are going to get worse. And we can't get caught up in we have to avoid getting caught up in the political side of it. But that doesn't mean, I don't know how to say this. We can't support abortion no matter what. But we can't necessarily allow them to turn this into a political argument. Abortion's wrong. It's just wrong. That's all there is to it. And maybe we can make a political argument out of this, but it's not a political issue. It's a whole lot of things, but it's not a political issue. And these politicians who want to go take communion in front of everyone, I mean, they're saying we're politicizing the Eucharist or turning it into a, quote, weapon, but they're the ones who are doing that.
Yeah.
We want it to be a article of faith and a part
and a sign of unity.
Yeah.
And we want it to be what it always was, a sign of unity. A unity that they do not participate in.
Yeah. And it's not a political discussion or a political weapon or political anything else, because it's not political. And we can't, I think, allow them to turn it into political.
Right.
But
because otherwise that would put the church at the that would place the church under politics.
Yeah.
Instead of the other way around.
And the people who are being persecuted deserve the recognition of being persecuted for the church.
Right. Yeah,
not
absolutely.
Persecuted because of spreading misinformation about COVID.
Yeah. And let's face, I mean, to put it bluntly, Father Altman is suffering let's call it a white martyrdom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And
at the hands of his bishop.
So the question is, what directions do you think these bishops are going to take in the next 10 to 20 years? Look, Pope Francis isn't going to last forever. Maybe the next one's going to be better, but it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case because, after the cardinals have been stacked so that the next guy who comes in is going to be the same as or even worse than Pope Francis, which is hard to imagine, but I don't know what to say about a case like that. I know there were cases like in England when there's an entire country full of Catholics and on one day, all of them lost their parishes. Mm-hmm. Every single Catholic in England lost their parish. And it was one swoop. And that would be 1558. Now,
right.
It's not like all those Catholics just stopped being Catholic. You know, a lot of them did because a lot of them didn't really care. But people held out, and there were clergy who held out. There were clergy who would sneak around and say mass in the privacy of people's homes.
Yeah.
And they were hunted down by there was a word for them. Hold on.
Oh, the sort of
Poussuivants. Pursuivants.
Say that again. I'm going to spell it out. Poussi. Sui.
Vants.
That's V as in
Victor. I believe it stems from a Latin word. So there were.
Oh,
Recusants.
it's actually believe it or not, it's a French word. It means pursuers.
Okay. So there were recusants who were the people who recusant, maybe, who refused to take the oath for the Church of England. And then there were the...
I would call them...
pursuivants.
Pursuivants, yeah.
Who
Pursuance is probably a...
Pursuants, who were chasing them and hunting them down. Also called the priest hunters. So...
Okay, makes sense.
There are priest hunters, there are people who are resisting, and it's not like the church died here. But it was a hectic time because there are priests running around who really didn't have bishops. I mean, the bishops had cut themselves off from the church. Now, that's not happening here in America right now, but we don't know what's going to happen.
No.
You know, these bishops they have control of the parishes. And even if Pope Francis excommunicated one, legally, I believe he would still have all the control he needs of that diocese, wouldn't he?
Okay,
under American legal law, the real estate in a diocese.
Oh, if a
is controlled by the bishop.
Excommunicated a bishop, I'm not sure how that would play out in law, because that's a good question. Because the Pope, if he excommunicates a bishop, or let's say the bishop incurs an excommunication, like by trying to ordain a woman or something like that, and then the Pope appoints a replacement bishop, I bet the church at large would prevail in securing the diocesan
You think so?
assets. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I bet the Pope would prevail.
Well, if the church
at least
tried.
today. Now, if a few, let's say, justices on the Supreme Court are swung back from, conservative to liberal, leftist, then maybe not. I don't know. I don't think if such a case went to the Supreme Court, I don't think it would be unanimous. But I don't know, because it's that's the thing. It's like that's a church internal matter, and like the recent decision of the Supreme Court, 9-0 in favor of religious liberty on foundations that I'm not necessarily sure that I like, but nonetheless. They seem to be sort of rallying around at least the religious aspect, the interior religious. Certainly a church itself governing its internal matters, they would say, well, yeah, that's the church at large, and however it does that, that's how it has to be followed. But that would actually make an interesting, I don't know, what do you call it, like a mock study or something, kind of.
But that's only in a case where the church actually tried to take control. But let's say, okay, we've seen over the past 50 years that when these bishops are doing terrible things, it's not like there's some kind of canon. Allowing them to do these things. The canon might say something good. Vatican II had all kinds of great things to say, but it was abused, and in the end, we've got priests all over America who are abusing the Mass, and we've got bishops who are abusing their authority. Yeah. What's happening to them? Nothing. So let's say that in light of the fact that Pope Francis made a change in the canon, let's say some of these bishops in America begin to ordain women, which I don't think is really all that inconceivable.
It's not inconceivable, except that the Pope just explicitly and very publicly modified canon law, so that incurs an automatic excommunication.
Yeah.
That's I think
let's say a bishop did it.
I think Rome would move immediately on that because the Pope.
Think so?
Oh yeah, think about it. You think about the character that we've seen of
the next
Pope
Pope,
Francis. I mean, the next Pope, if he's another Francis, and maybe he doesn't care, because Pope Francis would take it as a personal affront.
Right.
That's why I think the current Pope would move immediately on such a thing, because he's the one who put that law in, that change in there.
Mm-hmm.
But the next Pope, yeah, who knows? I don't know. Maybe the next Pope comes in. The excommunication happens. It's real. You can no longer go to Mass said by that bishop.
Right. But the bishop has a bunch of priests. He keeps saying Masses in the cathedral, and people keep going there. And if that bishop ordains priests, those priests are not priests after that point, unless he's had his excommunication removed by Rome. But let's say he just keeps on doing that. Are you sure about that? Yes. If a bishop is in schism with the church...
Not schism, excommunication.
Not schism, excommunication. That's why it's different for the Orthodox. Because they haven't been excommunicated. They're in schism,
but they're still
just
have
in schism.
Faculty. Right. They have the character and they have valid orders.
But until a bishop is in schism or excommunicates himself, he still is the bishop. So people like Father Altman are kind of...
They don't really have any recourse other than to appeal to the Pope himself, who probably agrees with Callahan.
Yeah. Now, eventually, what was I going to say here? I know what I was going to say. Okay, in history, these kinds of things have happened. Saint Padre Pio was suspended, wasn't he? For a short time? And even confined? I don't know if he was completely suspended, but he wasn't allowed to say public mass.
That could be. Especially
and he wasn't allowed to hear confessions for a while.
Yeah. But that might have been while we figure things out, not a punitive suspension. I don't know.
Yeah, well, what I've read about it stemmed from jealous priests and bishops.
Oh, okay. Then it probably was punitive.
Which it may not have looked like it, but in the end, that's where it was coming from. And I think that's where Father Altman's problems are coming from.
I think so. Right.
So, aside from just evil, just the jealousy, because people like him.
So let's say your bishop does something that incurs excommunication. Then what do Catholics in his diocese do? The priests themselves are still priests. They can say the Mass. I guess they can hear confessions. In theory, their faculty to do so comes from their bishop. But if their bishop is excommunicated, then what is there for those parishioners at the various parishes? Is there some kind of test of loyalty to the church at large versus this excommunicated bishop that the priest goes through?
Well,
I don't even know what Catholics do in that case.
Let's see. This was in 1570. Pope Pius V issues a papal bull excommunicating Elizabeth I.
Okay.
Because of this, it kind of brings down the wrath of Elizabeth I on Catholics and priests.
Right.
Now, part of that papal bull, it first of all outlined the fact that she was excommunicated and why, but then it said that she herself is not the real queen.
Right. He says that
and
he excommunicated her and anyone who obeyed her.
Absolved anyone from obeying her, and even excommunicated people who obeyed her, not just in religious matters, but laws.
Right.
So you're living in a country, and we don't see things the same way they did back then.
Right. Yeah. The bull actually, I'm reading Wikipedia. It said it required Roman Catholics to, I don't think they had the name Roman back then. They were just Catholic. It required all Catholics to rebel against the English crown as a matter of faith. This is the bull of Pius V, Regnans and Excelsis.
So there were two groups of priests in England at the time, I'm loosely putting them into two groups because it's not like either one was really organized, except for one group was Jesuit clergy who were there they weren't just there to try to minister to Catholics, they were there to try to take the crown back and to try to urge Catholic laity to take the crown back. Then there were they call them secular clergy. They were basically priests who just didn't have a bishop, who really weren't worried about the political side of it. They were trying to minister to the laity and give confession and say mass and things like that. The Pope finally appointed one bishop over all of them, and he leaned more towards the Jesuits. It's possible that if he hadn't done that, maybe there could have been some kind of settlement between the Catholics and the Protestants in the Church of England earlier, but because it wasn't, it lasted hundreds of years. After that, so these secular priests who were not really interested in fighting this political fight, you wouldn't call. Are they technically excommunicated? I don't know about that. A lot of them died martyrs.
Yeah, I mean, if it says if the Pope says, okay, you're required to rebel against, your king as a matter of faith, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Does it mean I have to pick up a spear and, storm the kingly palace? What does it mean to rebel?
Right.
Can I, each night before I go to bed, can I flip the king the finger, from my room or something? What is that? It's kind of a strange thing.
It's a very strange papal bull. But as I said, it's not like there were no Catholics in England. England was full of Catholics.
They had a lot of Catholics.
There were all kinds of problems that they had being Catholic because, first of all, they couldn't find priests to go to prison, to go to mass. It's hard to raise your kid as a Catholic when they can't see you publicly practicing your faith, and you couldn't publicly practice your faith.
Right.
You had to do it in. But we know that there are lots of them there. For example, you were put in jail for not attending the Anglican masses or the Anglican services. And so there were a lot of people going to jail, and then there were Protestants as well, because some people, there were like the Puritans. We talked about them in...
Right. They wouldn't have attended the Anglican Mass. Or,
right.
If it was a Mass at that time.
So, but, the prison system back then was kind of run by contractors and stuff and other institutions. They weren't run directly by the government. A jailer was happier to accept a Catholic priest than a Protestant minister, because if it was a Catholic priest in there, the jailer knew that people would be coming to visit him, and those people would bring bribes with him.
Oh, okay.
And he wouldn't even have to pay money to keep the priest alive for food and stuff, because other people would be doing that, because that's how many Catholics there were. There were still a lot of Catholics.
Yeah. So predominantly Catholic, actually, at that time. Still.
Yeah. And it was chaotic. And over the next couple decades, I think it's going to get kind of chaotic here.
Yeah. There will be a lot of, we will be put into places where situations where it's not quite clear what to do.
Right. If, I will stick to my claim that if Pope Francis tomorrow says no more Latin Mass, we do have to abide by that. And in my mind, the St. Pius XII crowd, or the 10th, it's the 10th, right?
Yeah.
I get confused because there's a couple different groups.
Yeah.
There's the 10th, and there's a 5th, and then there's a second crowd, I think.
Okay.
They get more and more removed from
fractured. Yep.
mainstream Catholicism as you go on. But they're in schism right now. And I don't think if Pope Francis bans the Protestant Church or the Latin Mass, that means we can go to these Protestant churches. They're
right. No.
They're not Catholic.
No, exactly. Yeah, that would not be allowed. Now, if, for example, that was the only Mass you could get to, not the only Latin Mass, not the only traditional Mass, but the only Mass you could get to without unreasonable travel, then you could attend that Mass.
You could?
Yeah. And
that was allowed. That was a recent...
well, no, I don't mean specifically relative to them, but for example, I asked a priest who knows and who I trust before I was going to Russia, and I said, so if I were to go to like one of their Eastern Orthodox liturgies, these are Eastern Orthodox, they're completely in schism, have been for hundreds of years. Would I be allowed to receive communion there if that was the only place I could attend a Mass, if I couldn't find a Catholic Mass out there? He said, from our point of view, from the Catholic point of view, yes, you would be allowed to, and that would be okay and an acceptable way to fulfill your Sunday obligation and to receive Holy Communion. From their point of view, they would not want you to do that. But so that's my point, is that if it's a valid Mass and it's the only Mass you can get to, you would be allowed to go ahead and attend that Mass and receive Holy Communion. But that's not likely to happen in America, at least at first. Now, we should be a little bit precise. The Pope might, through some motu proprio, reversing Summorum Pontificum, or whatever, modifying it, he might out and out ban the traditional Mass, or he might out and out. Or he might, impose some, you have to attend a Novus Ordo at least once per year, or something rather arbitrary and stupid like that. But what's extremely unlikely is that he will ban Mass said in Latin, because as the Novus Ordo right now stands, the official Novus Ordo is a Latin Mass.
Yeah.
And by permission, only under approval of the Holy See, can it be said in various other languages. And no priest, there's a bishop can't even prevent a priest from saying the Novus Ordo, never could prevent him from saying it in Latin.
Yeah.
Because that's the official promulgated Mass. So if, let's say the Pope did, somehow get rid of the TLM, well, we could agitate to our bishops for Novus Ordo reverent Latin Masses, and even say, and by the way, if, encourage the priests to say Ad Orientem and all the trappings that at least visually make it look like this is something holy and sacred and we're approaching the altar of God, and so on and so forth. Of course, they would probably honk the Pope off if everybody did that too.
All right, we're both stepping away. All right, so I'll keep talking then. When I say ban the Latin Mass, I am talking specifically about the TLM, traditional Latin Mass. I don't think I would take a whole lot of comfort in going to a Latin Novus Ordo, because it's not just the language, it's everything about the Latin Mass that we lost. It's the prayers themselves. The prayers themselves are better in the TLM. And so, I don't know. We're going to have to just wait and see. We can't tell the future, and we can't change whatever's going to happen. But you know what? Another thing that I wanted to point out about 16th century England was that the laity is what kept the church alive in England. And it wasn't thriving. But, if you consider the fact that... Hold He can get through. The door's open. Look, we all know that there's a huge number of Catholics who really aren't Catholic. You know, even the ones who go to Mass every week. For example, the Catholics out there who are voting Democrat. These are not real Catholics. That's a good example. And there's a bunch of them. And I would venture to say that in England, just before the Church of England started, there was the same kind of thing going on. There are Catholics who are doing that because that's what the rest of the crowd does. Or maybe they even think themselves great for going to church once a week. But when push comes to shove, they're not going to make themselves uncomfortable in order to keep the faith. Right. And they're not even going to go against the current in any way in order to keep the faith. So what happens when the Church of England comes about? A huge number of people stop being Catholic. And so what's left are the diehards. Well, you could argue those might be the only ones who make it to heaven anyway. I mean, let's say there was no Church of England. Those people who threw the Catholic religion out so quickly, they were really on their road to heaven?
Probably weren't on a path of salvation anyway.
I mean, you can't judge other people, but the fact that they were so quick, and the bishops who were so quick to throw the church under the bus, well, okay, maybe the same thing exists now. Yeah. We've got a small number of people who are diehard Catholics. The rest of them would go with any current, no matter what direction it went. Right. And so, now, here's the thing. When the Church of England came, it was up to the laity to keep the Catholic faith alive, which they did do. And they did do throughout all that time. I mean, even in 1950, there were still Catholics in England. Right. A lot of those were not just kept alive by the laity, but specifically by women who could not minister, but they were the ones, first of all, they were the first teacher of the kids, and second of all, they were able to do a lot of things that the men weren't able to do. So a recusant wife a lot of times wouldn't get punished. Sometimes the men would be thrown in jail because the wife was recusant. Okay. And sometimes even if the man was put to death for refusing to give up his faith, the property then went to the wife, and they put the man to death specifically so that they could seize the property. There were all kinds of there was a problem with persecuting women as opposed to men. The local authorities were hesitating to throw women in jail when they didn't care so much about throwing men in jail. And then there were legal questions of what happens to the property, because normally if I refuse to go to their church or if I claim loyalty to Rome, they could throw me in jail, take my property, and maybe even kill me.
But what if your wife's the one doing it and you get thrown in jail?
Right. Or what if I have a wife and after they've thrown me in jail, my wife owns the property? It's harder for them to get the property if it belongs to the wife.
Did they have a concept
just pointing out some of the
wives owning either in combination with or separately from their husbands?
There were some wives who for some reason were able to hold on to property. Okay. Widows and daughters a lot of times often had property. Well, that's good. But good. It was just now. A
lot of questions. Yeah, certainly. But I was just going to say that the point of it is that in order to be Catholic, you had to be willing to die in order to live as a Catholic. I mean, that's just
right.
How, if you weren't a Catholic who was willing to die in order to live that way, then you were a capitulator. And I think we're coming to that kind of situation today. Not that, I mean, it's very possible we will see a red persecution, but it could be a wholly white persecution without a bloody martyrdom like the English Reformation. But nonetheless, those who aren't ready to die in order to live Catholic are going to be the ones who simply stop off living Catholic under threat of something much less than death.
Yeah.
And they're going to lose their souls in the process.
Yeah. And it's going to be up to us to continue living Catholic. And it's going to come at some kind of cost. It always has. It always will.
I mean, if things are accelerating,
being Christian
it could
is
be
not
us.
free.
Otherwise, it could be our kids. But it may come where it's like, being Catholic, not only are we going to have to keep the faith and hold the line and be ready to be martyrs and so forth, but, imagine trying to do that. And, by the way, you don't have a priest. You can't receive Holy Communion. You can't have your confession heard. Yeah. And so on and so forth. Especially in today's world where there's, so many temptations, kind of everywhere.
Just woven into society. Woven into everything we do. I would also point out that, even in 1600, there was talk and they did try to take children from recusant families
Catholic
and relocate them with Protestants. And of course, we see this all the time in Marxism, and I think we're already seeing it in America, just not as heavily. But I think this is going to be one of those things. And another thing that a person is going to have to think about is, do I give in and keep my kids and raise them the right way, or do I allow them to see the persecution when they get taken away because I was so...
and pray that persecution eventually becomes a seed that strengthens their faith.
Yeah, especially when it comes to if it gets really red and we're put to death for it.
Yeah, that I can see. Yeah, I mean, parents in the early 1600s struggling with something like that in England. Wow, that I had not even thought about that as a question.
Yeah. So
that's it's kind of.
I don't think we came up with any answers here.
No, but a whole lot of questions for people to ponder. Except the one answer we do have is, no matter what is going on in or out of the church, it's only in the church that we're going to find salvation.
Right.
If we step outside,
we have to stay.
We're stepping into hell.
You can't. It has to be Catholic, no matter what, no matter how bad it gets. As long as this is the church, then that's where we have to be. And you can't trade your Catholicism for conservatism.
Right.
You might think you're going to be more conservative by going with, there's talk now about the Eastern Orthodox churches or the St. Pius X churches, but then you're trading in your Catholicism, and it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't help you at all because you're no longer doing it for the faith.
Right. Even when you feel like your church has abandoned you, you can't abandon the church. You can't leave the church.
Yeah. I guess that's the main point of it all.
Yeah.
If the church abandons you, then the church abandons you. But you have to stay with the church.
By the way, if you really want to be a little bit depressed, comparing our situation and our coming situation with the English Reformation, go to Wikipedia and look up the list of Catholic martyrs of the English Reformation. Now, they also have an article on the list of Protestant martyrs too. That, I'm sure that people make something of that, but Protestant martyr, I mean, what are they witnessing to? They're witnessing to evil anyway. But the list of Catholic martyrs of the English Reformation. This is just England. And I mean, it goes on and on.
Yeah.
Now, I think that what would be valuable today is to go and pull out of these all of the bishops. There aren't many.
No.
But pull the bishops out of here and create a prayer litany to the bishops who were martyrs of the English Reformation for help in our time.
Well, in the Act of Parliament in 1558, as far as I know, only one bishop wouldn't sign the oath.
Was that John Fisher?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He was the only one who... Now, I don't know if that's all the bishops in England.
That were martyred? Oh, yeah. Was that... Yeah,
Did King Henry have all of the bishops throughout England there in his palace making this decision? I don't know.
Yeah.
I imagine not.
Right. I doubt. I mean, gosh, there's still a lot of bishops in England at that time. But
yeah.
But in terms of being able to being willing to directly oppose the king, and certainly he had his list of bishops there, his contingent of bishops, ready to show the rest of the, faithful in England that, yes, this is all proper and as it should be.
Yeah.
So he would have had the bishops there just for that purpose. And
right.
John Fisher didn't go along with it.
Yeah, and he probably chose his own. And John Fisher happened to be one of the... He had kind of a lot of power and a lot of pull there, so they couldn't have had the meeting without him, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the other ones there were probably handpicked.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. We should try to come up with a list for that.
By the way, that French word you had that means pursuers, they were actually, I think they were just called priest hunters. I mean, as
yeah, that's what I said. They're
that I think they were just known as that was the common name for them then.
Priest hunters.
Yeah, I mean that's how bad it was. We have our band of priest hunters. I'll sign up to be a priest hunter. Just think how bad that is.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. And apropos of our podcast today, this past Sunday,
go to the bathroom while you're talking.
The Novus Ordo, I don't know what the TLM readings were, but the Novus Ordo reading 1 was from Amos 7:12-15, and I'll just read it out loud. Amaziah, priest of Bethel, said to Amos, "Off with you, visionary, flee to the land of Judah, there earn your bread by prophesying, but never again prophesy in Bethel, for it is the king's sanctuary and a royal temple." So Amaziah, the priest who's, beholden to the king, he's a king's, bootlicker, is telling Amos, who's a prophet who is saying things that are unfavorable to the king and that the king doesn't like to hear, but he's telling the truth. He's saying, get out of here, go to Judah and earn your bread prophesying there. Now Amos, who, back at that time, there were groups of people, bands of people, troops. You can almost think of it like a troupe, like an acting troupe, of people who were called prophets, who they would get drunk and then, act all crazy and say all kinds of crazy things and prophesy. And they did it in order to win favor of people and get people to give them money and that kind of stuff. Of course, the prophets that God chose for Israel, they weren't like that. They were typically not one of these these professional prophets, so to speak. God would pick someone and say, "Okay, I want you to prophesy for me." And often the prophets were kind of resistant to that. It's like, well, why me, God? But anyway, Amos answers Amaziah, "I was no prophet, nor have I belonged to a company of prophets. I was a shepherd and a dresser of sycamores. The Lord took me from following the flock and said to me, 'Go prophesy to my people Israel.'" So here we have a reading that is a demonstration of a prophet, Amos, who is being told by the king's priest, you got to go away from here because the king doesn't like what you're saying. Now he's standing up
like
to
a
him
bishop.
saying, no, I've got to tell you what God tells me to tell you. How many of our bishops are doing that? Maybe like you could count them on one hand today, the bishops who were doing that in the United States. So, and then of course the gospel was, the story of Jesus sending the apostles out and, telling them to preach and, basically, hey, you go preach the truth. If they don't hear you, shake the dust off your feet as a testament against them.
Wow. I didn't know that.
So just kind of weirdly apropos of our chosen podcast. And we didn't decide this topic until yesterday.
Yeah. You normally wouldn't have even known that. Would you go to the
I went to the Novus Ordo
Cincinnati Mass?
No.
Yeah, okay.
I didn't go to Cincinnati Mass. I went to the
Weren't you in Cincinnati?
No, not last weekend before.
Oh, okay.
So,
okay.
Anyway, just kind of interesting.
Well, I think that's about all I got for that.
Yep, me too.
Okay.
So what do we got in current events?
Let's talk about news. So, I guess Hungary has enacted this Child Protection Act, and it basically bans pro-gay stuff for the schools.
Oh,
so you're not allowed to.
You mean there's a country out there that's like getting it right?
And the European Commission is warning
Hungary.
They're
beside themselves.
To that they're going to do. I don't know what they're going to try
Hungary
to do,
should
but
do another Brexit.
Some kind of penalty suspending Hungary's voting rights from the Union. And Poland is.
How silly is that?
If you don't tell your kids to be gay,
if you don't think the way we do, we're going to keep you from voting with us.
Yeah.
What point is a vote under those terms?
Right. And Poland is expected to kind of side with Hungary on this, but we'll see what happens.
Are we gonna possibly, because we've already got Brexit, that's a done deal. Are we gonna see the disintegration of the European Union, or maybe?
I sure hope so.
Well, that would be a great thing, but my fear is that it'll be a little bit different. What could happen is these countries that are, that have sense, end up leaving the European Union, which means the countries either that are not, they don't have the guts to stand up for themselves, or they just are wholly sold, they've drank the Kool-Aid and everything anyway. That's going to be what's left of the European Union, and so it's going to turn so much even more leftward that there's going to be that collection of countries that are just a complete lost cause.
Yeah, well...
Now, the nice thing is that those, the leftism tends to breed... Well, I don't know. I was going to say leftism breeds weakness, but then what does weakness mean? Weakness means they're going to be taken over by Muslims or by China. And then they're going to become tools of Islam or of China, either one of which is a bad thing for the whole rest of the world. So, this could become a very bad thing.
Yeah. Speaking of Muslims, there's rockets being fired at... they're Iraqi air bases, but we have American soldiers there, and there's rockets being fired at them, both in Syria and Iraq.
Oh, gosh.
Plus, we've got, the Taliban is now saying that they control 85% of Afghanistan. Afghani government is vowing to retake these districts, but I kind of don't think
really
that's gonna
without
happen.
American help. No way.
Yeah, right. They couldn't do it with American help, really, because the Taliban never left,
Right.
So, I guess we'll see what happens. I mean, let's see.
I'm sorry. I'm going to sideline you for just a minute there. With regards to the Israeli thing. So, I recently, in fact, within the last month, started saying a it would be wrong to call it a novena because it's a thing that's supposed to be said for 12 years. And it's sort of a collection of prayers to what are sort of considered the 7 wounds of Christ. This was revealed by God to St. Bridget. It's approved by a couple of the popes. And one of the prayers, the biggest prayer is for the crucifixion itself. And at the very end of that prayer, the prayer as revealed to St. Bridget, you're praying for all these things, and then finally you pray for your country and for the unity of all nations under Christ, as well as for the diaspora, which is the kind of the scattering of the Jews after the coming of Christ. And this is a couple hundred years ago. This isn't some kind of like modernist thing to pray for the restoration of the unity of Jews, because the Catholic Church believes that Jews are supposed to eventually be restored to not just as Jews. They're supposed to adopt the faith. But that particular prayer in the little brochure that has the prayer that I've been using has a little, instead of as well as for the diaspora, it's as well as for all those who feel disenfranchised from their faith or something like that. Something silly like that. And I have always, when I read that, I thought, you know what? It's not like the diaspora, it's not like that's a done deal. It's not like they're secure. I'm going to keep saying it in the original sense. Mm-hmm. Well, things like what you brought up today kind of make my point that we still need to pray for that. We still need to pray for God to end the diaspora, to bring the Jews back, and to bring them back into their intended place in the Catholic Church. Yeah. So anyway, sorry about that. Didn't mean to, completely derail you, but just a sideline. I wanted to mention that.
Okay. Because I didn't have any news about Israel because we've been talking about it for the past 3 podcasts, and
But you said the one thing
major
about
going on there.
Israeli,
more of the same.
Air bases being bombed.
Yeah. So Tokyo and the Olympic and all of that, they're going to be. They said the games are going to be held without spectators, following a state of emergency declared in Tokyo beginning on July 12th, following an increase in the number of COVID-19 cases in the Japanese capital. I don't really know what that's all about. I just know that the word is out on COVID-19. We know that
it's a paper
tiger. We know where it came from now, and we also know that
phrase.
It wasn't as big a deal as they made it out to be. It just wasn't. Everybody knows that now.
The jig is up,
But they continue to say these things, and the authorities continue to act this way, and it's just, I don't know, there's nothing you can do about it. Hopefully we'll get a chance to do something about it the next voting cycle, but I don't know.
It seems to me, looking at the behaviors, the statements, the justifications that various authorities in government, in America and abroad, that they make for things. Oh, because of COVID, we're going to do this. Because there have been a few more cases, we're going to do that. That kind of stuff. And they don't seem to have any sense of irony or embarrassment or a sense of need to explain their justification. Yeah. And it makes me think that the people who have throughout the world, maybe except for third world countries, maybe only in industrialized countries, I don't know, but throughout the newsworthy world, the people who have by and large come into power in the various governments are people who they don't actually have the ability to understand that normal people don't think the same way they do.
Yeah.
And, that's one of the things that made Trump so different. I think Trump thinks the same way we do. And that's why he connected so easily, even in spite of maybe, some past things. You might say, oh, well, okay, yeah, that would be one of those things you don't want to get out that you said or whatever. But it's like, I think Trump he wasn't like up there in the clouds thinking that, oh yeah, everybody thinks the way I think, like these modern people are, these modern politicians, especially the leftist ones. And even I would think some of the conservative ones, I think, even going back and thinking about some of the things, George Bush and and I'm not even sure that they really got it the way Trump did. I think there's this kind of politician class that becomes completely disconnected from normal thought.
It sure seems that way. And they don't really care to they don't care to justify anything. They just
because they assume everybody's going to
I can get away with anything. COVID.
If I say it's from COVID is the reason we have to take power. I'll just tell people that, and they'll agree with me because they think the same way I do.
Despite the fact that nobody agrees with them, they just I mean,
anybody who doesn't agree with them, well, they're just malicious. It's not that they disagree; it's that they're malicious. They've got their own agenda. They're trying to get power instead of me having power.
They're conspiracy theorists.
Yeah.
Now, here's a weird one. Joe Biden signs a 72-point executive order placing tighter regulations and scrutiny on major corporations in a variety of sectors, including big tech companies. Okay. So there's a ban on there's a ban on non-compete clauses.
You mean like for employees?
Yeah.
Seriously? That's a standard thing in the industry.
It is a standard thing, except that I know most technicians are forced to sign one. And I also know that I know of cases where they've been held up in court, and I know that in cases where they've been overturned in court.
Yeah, often it depends on the state. Because there are states that vacate, what's the word, vacate such clauses, like, especially one, I think the phrase is if it's a right to work state, it means that you can't contractually sign away your right to work and stuff. But at the same time, I kind of get the purpose of the non-competes.
Right.
Because at least at the higher level workers, certainly like by the time you get to technical management and that kind of stuff, because you might go out, found your own company, and then start pulling clients away from
all their...
and that's
take all the customers.
That's a reasonable concern, but the fact that like with an executive order to just wipe those away, I mean, gosh, that's something for the states to worry about.
That's a small part of it. Here's the problem: when you look at the policies, a lot of them look like good policies, except that the Federal Trade Commission and the Food and Drug Administration are going to get a lot of the power to do these things.
Oh, wow.
So
this is a great big FTC and FDA power grab. So somebody put their little...
I think whatever they're saying they're trying to do, the opposite is going to happen, because that's usually how this works out.
Right.
For example, they're restrict the right to repair certain products. So they're trying to keep manufacturers from keeping customers from fixing their products so that they sell new products. For Apple, for example, you can't buy Apple parts. You have to buy parts made by someone else that will fit Apple products.
And this executive order would force Apple to sell parts to customers?
I don't know if it does that exactly, but it tries to make it harder for manufacturers to keep people from fixing their products. I don't know how that's going to work. I just know that it's not going to work in our favor.
It's not going to work in our favor, but it's kind of interesting. I wonder I'm kind of laughing because I wonder how that's going to work out in software. Because you know how Apple is; they're so closed and tight to the chest.
Oh, yeah.
Microsoft is becoming like more and more open source, but Apple. So is this going to be like, wait a minute? I want to use this executive order to force Apple to release to me the source code for this application that keeps crashing, so that I can fix it.
Oh, yeah, I doubt it. Well, you never know with these things. There's always, I mean, you know, originally the federal government stepped in to end the monopoly for long distance service.
Oh, right.
But they didn't do that. They created a monopoly.
Yeah.
And AT&T became the only long distance service. So
for a while, right?
Whenever the federal government steps in to do something, usually they seem to do the exact opposite of what they say they're going to do.
Yeah.
The end result, anyway. So I don't 72-point executive order. You never know with these things. And since it's an executive order, it could be turned over by the next president.
Yeah. You know, even a lot of liberals are getting annoyed with how much Biden is doing through executive orders instead of letting Congress do their job.
Yeah. They've removed 2 monuments to Confederate generals Robert E. Lee and Stonewall Jackson from downtown Charlottesville, Virginia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think
wasn't
they're
Charlottesville
trying to
like the original big
that was the
clash?
Battleground.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm thinking that clash between the where where Trump was misquoted as saying that you know that's the ground where the ground zero for that. What did they call it?
They wanted to remove those statues, and some people were against that, and they went there to protest the removal of those statues.
Right.
Well, the way it was painted in the media is that there's a bunch of white supremacists down there
objecting to the removal,
want to kill black people or something stupid like that.
And so Trump,
a bunch of counter protesters go down there,
right?
And then out of the blue, there is one guy who was a white supremacist who drove through the crowd and killed someone.
Yeah, right.
And so it became a big thing. And if you stuck up for the people who were there to protest the removal of the statues, that means you're sticking up for that one guy.
Yeah,
which is what they accused Trump of doing.
That's the fine people hoax that Scott Adams kept referring to.
Yeah. So at this point, nobody's going to open their mouth about removing these statues.
Yeah, especially we're going to lose.
2 statues are gone.
So much historical knowledge under the leftist regime. I mean, removing statues is one thing, but we're going to lose actual historical knowledge. They're going to they're going to go on a campaign to pull old books, burn them, and replace them with different knowledge that's not accurate.
Yeah, Americans are going to lose their context in history, and it's sad because it's an amazing story. I wish we had time to restart. You know, we started that project. We should start doing a series on American history. But, you know, we both work and we just...
It's so hard to, put together even 1.5 hour's worth of good material for that.
It takes a lot of research to do that.
Well, and not only research, but you've got to do the research, and then it's like, okay, I do research, and I'm going through all these things. I've got 3 hours of material, and I've got to select which, 5th of it or 8th of it I'm going to bother to present, and then I've got to create the context for why that matters today. So it's a hard task. I didn't appreciate how difficult a history textbook writer's job is before we, did our couple of episodes on that.
Huh. I just got a text from my wife. They've got that George Floyd monument in Toledo.
The mural.
It was struck by lightning, it looks like.
Kind of biblical, don't you think?
It was destroyed.
Does God, is there some reason God has some special favor for Toledo? It's like, hey,
Yeah.
you can have your George Floyd, but not here.
Yeah. I guess some people are claiming this was not lightning, but it was something else.
Some white supremacists simulated lightning to strike it.
Yeah.
When they put a big old Tesla coil there and shoot lightning at it or something.
Yeah.
You want to talk about conspiracy theorists?
I would have to read this for too long.
The actual story for
make
that?
it a news story.
Yeah, that's
okay.
fine. It's just
I'll move on here.
Honorable mention.
So there's Cubans out there, thousands of them, who are protesting in Cuba against the Cuban government. And they're protesting the food and medicine shortages, which I don't get at all. How do you protest a shortage? I mean, that's actually called a riot, usually.
Yeah, they're food riots.
But
basically.
Okay, so it's... But then again, this is a communist country, and in communism, the government has taken over control. So if there's a problem, guess what? It is the government's fault. Yes. And so it would be right to... I don't know how you protest a shortage, you know?
It's not like... Yeah, I think what these are food riots.
Yeah. There are protesters in America, especially Miami, with Francis X. Suarez, trying to urge the U.S. to consider airstrikes on Cuba, to try to out the Cuban leaders.
What Putin do? I mean, the big deal with Cuba was that it was a puppet of the Soviet government, initially, right. And because they installed Castro, and then there was the whole invasion at the Bay of Pigs that was a big fiasco and failed its objective. But right now, not that Biden would have any, the backbone to do it, but right now, if America said, you know what, Cuba's right on our borders, these people are suffering, we keep taking their refugees, and we know how bad life is because their refugees are living here telling us, let's go ahead and oust the government and let Cuba can be a territory of the United States, like Puerto Rico or something.
Yeah.
And give the people some, the ability to rebuild themselves.
I don't know if Puerto Rico's a whole lot better shape, though.
I don't know. If it
you know
is
what? They're in better shape than Cuba.
Yeah. They're definitely in better shape than Cuba. But my point is if we did that, what would Putin do? Would that incur some kind of massive military movement from Russia? I don't know if Russia still has anything going on in Cuba. I mean, at one time, communism was all about the party as a whole. Yeah,
and I don't think it's that way anymore.
Now it's like about.
There are interests in communist countries to try to get other countries to be communist, but there's not one party anymore.
The two big ones are Russia and I think Putin is a old line communist.
Yeah. Okay.
And China.
Yeah.
And right now the stronger of the two is China. So but yeah, if we said, hey, let's do some good for the people in Cuba, and it would be a minor military skirmish from the United States' point of view.
Okay, I'm going to read this, and you just give me your initial thought.
Okay.
At least 92 people are killed and more than 100 others wounded in a fire in a COVID-19 isolation ward in Nasiriyah, Iraq. The fire started when sparks from faulty wiring spread to an oxygen tank, causing it to explode.
Huh.
What sticks out to you there?
Well, aside from the fact that they're rounding up people with COVID in concentration camps, I didn't know that oxygen tanks exploded.
That was my thought. Oxygen isn't a flammable gas, and
in order
wiring would not cause it to explode, or sparks wouldn't cause it to explode.
Yeah, I mean, I can see where if there's some other flammable gas there that is, that catches fire, maybe there's another flammable gas that is heats the tank up. If something heats the tank up and causes it to explode that way, but that would be like that would be like a tire bursting rather than an explosion per se.
I'm going to assume this is a reporter who just doesn't quite understand the chemistry of it.
Yeah,
that was in the news.
I mean, I'll do the research. If I'm wrong, I'll issue a retraction next week. But
no, you're not wrong. That was the first thing
I don't think oxygen explodes like that.
I wasn't even going to include it until I saw the reason for the explosion. I thought, well, that's just wrong.
Yeah.
So, let's see. Oh, okay. The big news is that the British billionaire Richard Branson travels into space and the VSS Unity. Did you see the space flight?
I did not.
It was... Okay.
You sent it to me.
Basically...
I clicked it, and it's like, oh man, I don't have time to watch this right now. But I haven't gone back to it.
I didn't mean to do that. It was the only one that I could find. But you've got these two big airplanes with a smaller airplane attached to them.
Okay. Wait.
The airplanes are normal airplanes.
The
two big ones are winged jets, airplanes, whatever you want to call them.
One smaller one attached to them.
Yeah.
Like
so
a tether?
They fly... Well, I don't know. They're attached.
I'm trying to imagine how, because
bracketed.
Flying airplanes in such
all three of them
formation.
Are attached together. They're not tied together. They're attached. I guess it would be one airplane, but when you look at it, it looks like two.
Oh, okay. Okay. All right.
So this big airplane, it's got two sets of wings. Put it that way.
Okay.
It carries the smaller one up close to the edge of the atmosphere.
Okay. And
then lets it go. So they're using normal wind and air to achieve flight.
To a certain point.
So they let the smaller one go, and then the smaller one uses jets to propel itself further out into space.
Okay.
And then, it was there. I don't know how long it stayed there. Not very long. And then it came back down.
Okay.
Yeah.
But he reached what is considered space in terms of altitude.
Right.
As a private endeavor.
Yeah. You gotta say it real loud.
You didn't put anything on for your dad?
Can you go over there?
I am, but I was putting your mom.
Sorry. I forgot to go over and get Grandpa. Do you know where his medicine is? You don't? Alright, I'll tell him I'll be over soon. I don't have too much longer to go. Alright, thank you. I forgot. I completely forgot to get Dad set up for it.
Is it like a 2-minute thing or a 20-minute thing?
It's a 10-minute thing.
Oh. I mean, I could hang out. You could go do it and come back if you want.
Okay. Richard Branson. Branson?
Right.
I don't know.
Space guy.
His flight company is Virgin Galactic. It was neat because you don't see space achieved that way very often.
Right.
Actually, I've never seen it, but I imagine. I mean, it's not that big of a stretch. Well, we'll get the rocket up too close to the edge of the atmosphere with normal planes, which would require less fuel, and then that can take over and start flying out. The thing is, all he did was go up in space. And so as amazing as that is, I just want to point out that it takes a ton more fuel to make that practical to the point where he could orbit.
Oh, right. I see.
because he's got to be going much, much faster in order to orbit, if I understand it correctly.
Okay.
Especially some of these space places, like, let's say he wanted to hook up to the ISS. Mm-hmm. Well, do you know how fast that thing's going?
Yeah, you've got to reach orbit, and then you've got to adjust your. You've got to boost your speed at the right times to increase your orbital distance until you're almost matching the ISS, and then you've got to make the final boost at the right moment to bring you in line with it.
Think about this. The International Space Station goes around the planet, which, aside from being a huge planet, they're up above it, so they're further out, which means they have to travel a lot further to go completely around it. They go around the planet every 90 minutes.
Yeah.
That is incredibly fast, and there's no way that tiny little craft, with the small amount of fuel that it had, could reach that kind of speed, I think.
Right.
So it's, a lot of times, you got milestones when you're doing these kinds of things, and so they do this, and then they do this, and they take an extra step to do this. It's not like he could just, okay, now that we did this, let's try to get going real fast. It's like, whoa, wait a minute, you got a ton more weight that you have to get up there if you're going to do that.
Right. This was kind of like, if the goal, if his goal is, for example, reaching the ISS, you could think of that as kind of like the goal is international, like transatlantic, transoceanic jetliner flight, and he just did the Kitty Hawk launch.
Yeah.
It's kind of like that.
Yeah, it was
significant for what it is, but still got a ways to go.
Yeah. And that's all I got in the news.
All right. Well, I got a few things. A little bit of nonsense, a little bit of weirdness. For one thing, they used to have a show, Kids Say the Darndest Things, or something like that.
Yeah. You know who hosted that?
For a while, Bill Cosby did. I don't know who else.
I think.
Oh yeah, Groucho Marx hosted. Wow. Okay, that would be that would be fun to watch him hosting that.
Wait a minute, I don't know. You know what?
He did
I know that there was an old black and white version
of Kids Say the Darndest Things. Because he hosted that one.
Yeah.
What was the name of that show he hosted? The game show.
Yeah, it was called. I can't remember the name.
You Bet Your Life.
Yeah.
And there's that one episode that you and I have looked for multiple times, I'm sure, that we wish we could find, and I can't seem to be able to locate it anywhere.
Okay, I guess there was a house party.
A house party?
A show called House Party.
Really?
And it was hosted by Art Linkletter.
Who's that?
That was actually a radio show. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
And then there was a television show called Art Linkletter's House Party.
Okay.
And apparently that's where the concept for Kids Say the Darndest Thing came from. I was wrong about Groucho Marx. So Groucho Marx had nothing to do with it.
Okay.
But I remember seeing it was an old black and white show with kind of a it had the same. They were doing the same things as they do on Kids Say the Darndest Thing.
I see. Okay.
So I guess that's what I was thinking of.
That could be. Got it. Well, this teacher in Wales asked her class of primary school students to tell me one thing that I should know about you. Well, she asked them to write down one thing that she should know about them before she starts teaching them. This is at the beginning of the school year.
Yeah.
One little girl, I think it's a girl, wrote down, "I take a long time to poo. My record is 2 hours, 15 minutes.
That's good.
Kids do not get the
wow.
concept of TMI.
Yeah. They just say it all, you know?
Okay. So the next one, you know what? I just got to go with this next one as kind of being apropos as a follow-on of that one. I guess you could call this one Look Before You Lou. So a 65-year-old man in Austria, the city of Graz, was surprised with a sharp pinch in the area of his genitals. He sat on his toilet, and after feeling a sharp pinch in the area of his genitals, looked down and found a 5-foot python in his toilet.
Ouch.
Yes.
And it bit him in the private?
Bit him somewhere in the private. He said in his genitals. He didn't say whether it was on his sack or on the actual thing or what, but...
That's terrible.
Gosh, I know. I can't imagine living in a world where you got to check your potty for snakes.
Yeah.
They're guessing it crawled up there from the drain pipe is the thing.
It's weird the things that you get used to doing that if somebody saw you doing them, they would be like, what are you doing? I mean, okay, so when we lived in Cleves, of course, a lot of places here in the Ohio Valley have a problem with ladybugs. Those little brown.
Oh man, they're nasty.
For some reason, people call them potato bugs, but
really?
they're ladybugs.
Never
heard
of that.
Yeah, they're. Anyway, to the point where, like, the first time that I saw them, I walked in and I turned the light on, and the light didn't come on. And I'm like, what's going on? And here the light was on. It's just that it was covered with ladybugs. And
wow, that thick?
I couldn't see the light. They were terrible.
Oh my
Cleves.
gosh. Wow.
Especially the first year down there. But when I would get up in the mornings, I would brush my hair. And one or two times I started brushing my hair, and then ladybugs fell out of my hair because they were in the brush.
Oh, that would make me so disgusted.
So every morning from then on, I get up to brush my hair, and I take my brush and I smack. Sorry, I got the dog. The dog thinks someone's knocking on the door. It was me. Okay, look, see, I was doing this.
You know, our dog does that. He gets to bark. Yeah. He'll bark until you go and
it's just me.
Open the door and look outside, and then he'll stop barking.
I wonder if he saw me knock on the table now, and he's not satisfied.
You got to go to the door and open it and look outside. You got to check. He wants you to check on it, or she.
Yeah,
is it a she or a he?
Check.
Banjo sounds like a boy's name.
It's a he.
Okay,
it's
he wants
a boy.
you to check on it.
Anyway,
so anyway, ladybugs
every
in your
morning.
hairbrush. That's disgusting.
Before brushing my hair, I would bang it on the sink. Mm-hmm. Well, in Cleves, the sink was a giant. It wasn't a normal. It was like a cast iron basin of some sort.
So you could bang at something.
It was an old sink.
Yeah,
and it was loud. And every morning I'd be like bang, 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 bang.
Okay, time to
and
get up.
It drove Vicky nuts. She hated it, and she kept yelling at me. Every morning you wake me up banging. Why do you do that?
Did you tell her why?
I told her why, and it made sense to me. She's like, bang it on your hand.
That's not going to do it.
Yeah, I guess I could do that.
You could, but then you shake them all off on your hand.
Yeah, I know. Then it's on your hands, and you just got out of the shower, and you don't want ladybugs on your hand. But you know how brushes get when because we're a big family, and we all share the brush that's in the bathroom. So a coating of hair gets on it, that under the bristles you have a bunch of hair, and the ladybugs get down in that, and so they don't come out real easily. You got to really bang them out.
Yeah.
So, but if it were my toilet, that I don't ever look down into the toilet before I sit. I can imagine getting that habit pretty quickly.
But the thing is, just having read that story now, I might start.
Probably will.
At least I know the next few times I'm up there, it's going to be like, is there something in there?
You'd only have to get bit once.
No, that guy's going to check every time for the rest of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this next one is it doesn't. It's not even reported as a like a weird news link or something like that, because I usually go on Google and search for weird news. This is just a news story. It is so bizarre that I have to include it. Let me ask you this. Okay, so let's suppose that you're at a business and the particular business has one of those. Let's just say like bizarro bathroom policies that, whatever's listed on the door, anybody can use it. So you might be, you could be at the urinal doing your thing and a chick could walk in, or your daughter could be, because, I know that when women go to the bathroom, they're all stalls and they do their thing there. But I got to think that there's times when they, maybe need to like lift their shirts, adjust their bras, something like that, fix things at the mirrors. Okay, that's my point. Right. And a dude could be walking in. So in Tennessee, because such things are reasonable and because this is a reasonable measure, Tennessee isn't going to tell the businesses you have to, have this bathroom policy or that bathroom policy. But they said, look, if you're going to allow anybody to use your bathrooms, regardless of sex, if you're basically going to have non-sex discriminated bathrooms, you got to put a sign next to it that says that. And the Tennessee legislature even put the wording, this facility maintains a policy of allowing the use of restrooms by either biological sex, regardless of the designation of the restroom. That's a sign. Simple sign, straightforward. Okay. Hey, if you're a dude, you might be walked in by a chick. If you're a woman, you might be walked in on by a dude. You ought to know that before you go in and use this public restroom. Perfectly reasonable thing. So, this judge, federal judge, Alita Trauger, I think is how you say her name, Trauger, whatever it is, appointed by Bill Clinton, decided that the law raises significant, get this, First Amendment concerns. I don't know. Is like bathroom use somewhere in the First Amendment? I don't get it.
I don't remember seeing it there.
I got to go back and read my First Amendment because she says it raises First Amendment concerns. Gosh, these liberal leftist federal judges are so stupid. There's no other way to describe it. They're just like, it's like they're trying to outdo each other in stupidity. It's like, hey, I can be more stupid than you. Watch this.
Sure seems like it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's, I know I called that one, I'm trying to come up with titles for these. Federal jurisprudence. Yeah. Okay. And my last one. Okay, this is, okay, I'm going to call this, Gary Burbank's contest. Okay?
Okay.
So,
see, a lot of people might not know who Gary Burbank is.
I know, and that's why I got to... So, all right. For those who don't... In Cincinnati, we have a AM radio station, 700 WLW. It is currently the strongest broadcast AM station, I think, in the United States, possibly in the world.
Yeah, I think it is. And
what happened was that they obtained an initial license to broadcast back in a certain day of the FCC regulations. They got that license. They've maintained that license ever since. The rules have changed, but they've always allowed to be grandfathered in because they held that initial license. So they transmit so strong that people 3 states away, sometimes when, the ionosphere or whatever is just right, can actually pick them up. Anyway, that's
I usually will listen to that rather than another station if I'm traveling between states, because I know it's going to last
you'll be able to
a
get
long
it.
time.
So that's just cool about the station. Well, they've got a number of personalities that have been part of the station, and one of them is a fellow named Gary Burbanks, who...
Probably the best one.
He probably is the best one. He has this thing, he does, sports shows and that kind of stuff. But one of the things he does is he has these short clips where he assumes an identity named Gilbert Gnarly, and he always, when he introduces himself, this is Gilbert Gnarly, Gnarley. And
we kind of briefly talked about him last week.
Did we? Okay, so he makes these phone calls.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, because I brought it in reporting the drive-by clapping.
Right, he did the drive-by clapping. Well,
he has this way. I mean, sometimes he's just immediately so off the wall that it's just like, you're. It's like, how can he do this with a straight face? But once in a while, he has this way of introducing an absolutely absurd situation, but having a fully reasonable story as a backdrop to it. And on one of them, he called up a place, and he was like almost in tears, and he's saying, this restaurant, I forget if it was a McDonald's or a Subway or something like that. And he says, they have the sign on there that it says no shoes, no service, and it says no shirt, no service. The sign doesn't say no pants, no service.
So he didn't wear pants.
And he had a fully reasonable story for why he was in the store trying to get service without pants. I forget what the story was. I just remember Anyway, so this is the contest. If anybody can come up with a reasonable backstory for this, send it in to us, okay? All right. The story is a naked California woman was rescued Tuesday after she got wedged between the concrete walls of two buildings. She was discovered around 2 p.m. Workers at the nearby auto body shop told the local TV station they heard the woman calling for help, unable to pin down her location, and called the police. The cops...
Wedged between two concrete
Cops came in, they got on the roof, and looked between the two walls, and she's all naked. She was in pain. She was screaming in pain. She was upside down, too.
Oh. Well...
Stuck in place in a space less than a foot wide, according to fire officials. She's wedged in there. We can't physically get to her. She can't crawl out. They actually ended up having to cut through one of the concrete walls in order to reach in and remove her and bring her out. The officials...
Did she tell them why she was there?
Fire officials did not immediately say how the woman got stuck or why she was naked. It's a mystery to all of us here right now. Wynn, let me go find out who Wynn is. He must be a fire rescue worker.
Okay.
Yeah, he's the fire captain.
A few.
Told the local radio station, told KTLA, the radio station or TV station or whatever. He said more details would be released when they become available. Okay, so right now it's an open story. Naked woman wedged upside down between the concrete walls of two buildings that are less than a foot apart from each other.
Okay,
I want to roll out that contest. Come up with a story.
Yeah. Sure, if you're on top of the building, sunbathing in the nude, which women are apt to do.
Okay, sure.
And you fall asleep.
No,
you roll over, and suddenly you're falling down. You're able to catch yourself, but painfully.
Well, I'm thinking the wind.
And now you're stuck.
The wind blew her top over, down between the two buildings. Thought, well, maybe she could reach it, and she's reaching down and fell in.
Or yeah. Or if she was drunk and went out streaking, and then suddenly realized, oh, I forgot my pants, and then was trying to hide from people by wedging herself between two buildings, and then got caught there and was trying to get out and squirmed around to where she was stuck for good.
No, she
you never know.
She dropped something. She was on the roof.
She must have dropped down because she was upside down.
She got locked out of the roof access. And so she was trying to get down. She didn't want people to see her, so that's why she went between the two buildings. She took off all of her clothes in order to form a rope so that she could try to get down. And as she got down, she got stuck.
There you go.
She thought, well, okay, I'm maybe close enough to the ground if I can squirm around, and that's how she ended up upside down.
Yeah, that's a nightmare. I would not want that to happen to me.
I mean, just think, I'm stuck between two concrete walls. They weren't even nice surfaces.
Right. It's just that concrete against all your skin.
Oh, man.
I would never take my clothes off again.
Yeah, I'd be all, forget it. I'm going to
I would
shower
want
with
the
my
comfort
clothes on.
of clothing always.
All right. Anyway, that's
Okay.
all I got.
Well, we do have our saint of the week.
That's right. Who is our saint of the week?
And this is a fitting one. Nicholas Owen, also known as Little John,
Little John.
died 1606 under King James I persecution
that's right.
of Catholics in England.
He was a priest. He was during the reign of Queen Elizabeth.
No, he was a lay person.
Okay.
And he was a
He
carpenter,
was a lay brother. Mm-hmm.
and he made priest holes.
Oh, to hide priests.
Right. Now, as we talked about, we've been talking about the English persecution in England. Anyone who refused to take the oath of allegiance to the Church of England were considered guilty of treason, high treason, and labeled recusants. So, in general, at first, the Catholic laity, I think when King Henry started this, he basically targeted not so much priests as people who had any kind of power.
Influencers.
So if,
kind of like today.
for example, St. Thomas...
well, St. Thomas More, certainly.
St. Thomas More, was a high position. He didn't take the oath, and so he was eventually killed. But, Queen Elizabeth comes along, and she kind of pushes further so that priests were included, and eventually the laity and pretty much anyone. And so Nicholas Owen was a carpenter, and he publicly defended St. Edmund Campion and was jailed for this reason.
Okay.
He stayed some time in jail. He gets out of jail, and he joins the Jesuits and kind of travels around with Father Henry Garnet. I think this is where we get most of the stories about him. But he was a small guy, and they say he wasn't a whole lot taller than a dwarf, and he walked with a limp, and he had a hernia for most of his life.
Oh, wow.
So he worked through a lot of pain, but he was a master carpenter, and he would visit mansions and families who could afford to house a priest would hire him to make hiding places for the priests.
Right.
And he was so good at it that countless priests escaped from the authorities, because even, the authorities would get word that there's a priest in this house, and they would come and they would search the whole house, and they couldn't find him. And there were cases where they would spend days and days searching the house, even tearing walls and flooring out, still not finding him. He would do things like he would build a false wall and then build another false wall in front of it, so that they would knock down the first false wall and say, well, no, there's no one here, and not realize there was another false wall that actually hid the priests. He was good enough to where he would have these hiding places. He would have holes for air and food to get into the priest, who might be stuck in there for days, waiting for them to finish searching. And even with the holes there that they could feed the priest through, they still wouldn't find him. He was, it's said that there are hundreds of places that they never did find. And so he did this for a number of years. He was eventually, he did go to jail a second time, and he ended up in the Tower of London. And he was tortured for a time, but he was a layman, and so they set him free. But they didn't know who he was.
Oh.
And then a third time, he was betrayed. He and another lay brother were accompanying two priests, and they all hid in the house and under one of his priest holes. And the the priest hunters were there for, I think, like a week. It was close to a week.
Wow.
Searching. They still hadn't found him, but he and his friends were starting to kind of starve to death.
Yeah.
So, Nicholas Owen dressed up as a priest and tried to run away, hoping to draw them out so that his priests could actually get away.
Oh, wow.
But eventually they caught all 4 of them.
Oh, that's okay.
And, but this time, William Cecil, who was the, Secretary of State, I think, realized who he was. So they tortured him for several days trying to get information. They wanted to know where all these priest holes were because he was like the one guy who knew where all of them were. Mm-hmm. And he still had not, they still didn't know some of his secrets as far as how to disguise places for the priests to hide. And so they tortured him and tortured him. They couldn't get anything from him. Also, they wanted the names of the different families that were giving quarters to the priests. He finally died on the rack. His innards were spilling out. He had been pretty much stretched apart.
Oh, man.
The jailers who killed him tried to claim that he had committed suicide because he was despairing from the pain, but no one believed him. And he was canonized in 1970 as one of the 40 martyrs of England. And that is Saint Nicholas Owen.
Wow.
Died March 2nd, 1606.
1606. Canonized 1970.
Yeah. Quite a story.
Yeah.
I like this one because he was just a layman and he was a worker. And like us, he was a skilled craftsman, and he was able to use that to do some really great things.
And apropos of our discussion today, and the thing is, he did what he must. He did what he could until he had to do what he must, which, he tried to save the lives of the priests that he was trying to hide at the time. It's unfortunate that they caught all of them.
Yeah.
But he wasn't willing to compromise.
Right. Yeah. Quite a man for us, the laity, as we look at these next coming decades and what it's going to mean for us and how we're going to have to live.
Yeah. And what's interesting about him is his perseverance in his work. He being caught and even tortured multiple times, but going back to doing what he did, building priest holes and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing.
I mean, today people would say,
so that's all I got.
You might be tortured. You better stop. No,
right.
He didn't. He's a model.
You might be ridiculed on social media. And,
yeah. People won't like you.
People will dislike you or give you the thumbs down or unfriend you. So.
All right. Well, good saint.
Okay.
Nicholas Owen.
I think we're done.
All right.
Yeah. Well, folks, think about what we said. And as always,
circle the beads. Bye, everyone.
And we'll see you next week.
Yep.